Okay, guys, as promised, the second reading from What I Own, my new novel, which I should mention is out on August 20th. In this case, one of our main personalities, Elliot Wade, has found himself in a high performance car with two very shady characters. Here we go. Elliot accelerated, working up through the gears. With a click, Jim snicked his seatbelt into place. There was no such sound from the rear, which wasn't sensible. This was a genuine 1920s raceway, which meant there'd be no point even looking for safety zones or shock absorption barriers, just rickety wooden fences with rotted concrete posts located every dozen or so yards. "You want to belt up, Mr. Lonigan?" Elliot said. "You might not care about getting hurt yourself, but if we hit anything, I don't want you flying into the back of me at 100 miles an hour, okay?" "100?" Lonigan sneered. "I'll believe that when I see it." That comment made Elliot's mind up. They were already running at 30 plus, and he was fast becoming aware of the extras in the boot. The Merc swayed like a boat, but he tromped the gas harder. As they entered the first curve, they passed 40, and the car's rear end swung out of line even with the steep banking. Elliot hung a sharp right against the turn, tyres shrieking to bring it back under control, sending them rocketing uphill, but then swung a left and hit the gas, gunning them down onto the next straight. "Nice," Jim commented. Lonigan said nothing, but it was satisfying to hear his belt click. Tiered rows of bleachers flickered by on their right, but they were close on 50 when they reached the next real obstruction. The track banked again, shallower this time, when from some dark place above and to the right, a hidden party shoved a wheelbarrow down into their path. It was heaped with house bricks, which scattered as it rocked and juddered. Elliot spun the wheel right and then left again, swerving past the obstacle without losing speed. In the boot, the heavy paving stones clattered. Elliot checked the rearview mirror. Lonigan's gaze was fixed back on him, narrow and cool. Elliot glanced sideways at Jim, whose tall, well-cut form sat braced, though his expression was relaxed. It took more than a quick drive around a crumbling old circuit to make men like this jumpy, but Elliot had more to give them yet. At the next bend, he was pushing 60. Along the centre of old-fashioned banked raceways like this, a dotted line would once have been marked in black paint. That was the 50-foot line. If drivers stuck to it, even at high speed, they supposedly wouldn't need to steer around the corners. Needless to say, the 50-foot line had long faded, so now it was about personal judgment. Elliot commenced a long, slow turn before he'd entered the bend, but already the back of the car was swinging like a pendulum. As he'd feared, there was black ice too, and in consequence he lost traction, the Merc spinning out of control like a top, turning round and round, wheels screaming, shocks bouncing, the windscreen an ever-changing array of track and bleacher. Jim swore, but on the third revolution, Elliot drove them out of it, ramming back up through the gears, flooring the pedal and blasting them forward. They'd lost speed, they were down to 50 again, but he rapidly reascended to 60, and then 70. On this next stretch, 3 corroded wrecks had been abandoned in the middle of the track, one in front of the other, with perhaps 50 yards between each one. It was a classic slalom, but Elliot veered through it, tight on 75, barely braking, though in every case steering well clear of the jagged, rusty metal. Even nicking the Merc's paintwork would go against him, as that might render it useless for whichever job was in the offing. 100 yards after the wrecks, a wall had been constructed across the track. It wouldn't be mortared, just house bricks piled on top of each other, but it stood a good 7 feet tall and there was no apparent gap. Elliot bore at it full speed. He knew it would be an optical illusion. The needle rode past 80, the wall looming at them until it filled their entire world. Jim was as tense as coiled steel. Elliot even heard the sucked-in breath of Ray Lonigan, and then he saw it. The way through. The wall had been constructed in 2 halves, one 30 yards in front of the next, both overlapping each other by a few feet. Only when you were right upon it did the perspective change and you spotted the space between them. With half a second to spare, Elliot spun them into a handbrake turn, the Merc swinging around again with that weight in the back, and then floored the accelerator, screeching forward before swinging again the other way this time to get around the second wall. Beyond the chicane, they spun 360 degrees, another patch of black ice, but Elliot didn't lose control and gunned them forward again. The needle dropped back to 70, but they were already approaching the next bend and he hammered them through it, the car ascending the steep bank with frightening velocity. They shared a vision of the Merc taking off, smashing the wooden fence and lofting high before exploding down through the skeletal framework of the bleachers. But Elliot held the curving track right the way around, a foot of clearance between himself and the fencing, and when he brought them down onto the flat again, they were travelling at just under 100 miles per hour, the world whipping by. "You wanted a ton, Mr. Lonigan?" "You've got it," Elliot shouted.